Welcome, and thank you for joining us at another Home Dialyzers United webinar. This month, we're celebrating World Kidney Day since March is World Kidney Month. We are excited to have with us a global perspective on living with kidney disease and dialysis. This coincides with HDU's recent rebranding to include a more global approach to home dialyzers everywhere. Kidney disease does not discriminate. Worldwide, there are over 800 million people with CKD, and most of them don't even know they are vulnerable. More than 2 million people worldwide are on dialysis. Today, we're going to hear from a dear friend and colleague, Falco Waringen from the Netherlands. Falco has been working with various organizations around the globe to produce innovative devices in renal replacement therapy. The most recent effort has been with the Dutch Kidney Foundation and Nick's Kidney, a truly portable dialyzer that weighs less than 25 pounds and fits in a suitcase. Next, we have Maddie Warren, the queen of dialysis. Maddie is a longtime dialyzer who is not eligible for a transplant, but that has never stopped Maddie from living her best life, which includes acting in local plays and musicals, skydiving, and working at her own consulting company. From the other side of the world, we have Jasmine Wong. Jasmine has been a dialysis nurse in Singapore for over 20 years. Additionally, she has been a CEO of a company that has been actively involved in developing new dialysis devices, including for PD and home hemo, and most recently has joined forces with Next Kidney. I know you will enjoy learning about dialysis from a global perspective. As always, please comment in the chat and we will answer questions at the end. You will find registration information on our website and in social media posts across all platforms. Please join us.
Hello, welcome to this webinar session, and we hope that you will enjoy it. So today we have guests that we are very happy to include. Our first guest is Miss Jasmine Wong, the CEO of Next Kidney in Singapore. She was a dialysis nurse and is highly experienced in patient care and management. Our second guest is Maddie Warren, and she's the director of a consultancy agency that provides services in patient relations, advocacy, market access, and policy for a range of medtech and pharmaceutical clients. She's a prolific advocate and speaker about the benefits of home dialysis and has been dialyzing herself at home in the UK for 25 years. Her passions and fitness are exercise, skydiving, performing arts, and having fun adventures. So definitely somebody to go on with vacation. With that, everybody welcome. And we have a few questions that we'd like to discuss today. First question that we have is, what's your experience with dialysis in your country? Could you compare and contrast with your knowledge of other countries? I'd invite, for instance, Jasmine, would you start off the discussion?
Okay, thank you, Dr. My name is Jasmine, and I am in Singapore. I worked previously as a dialysis nurse in a private clinic, and I was managing patients in a private center. So over here, we are mainly patients are mainly on 3 times a week dialysis, and they go to a center. We do not have home hemodialysis. It's not the normal here. We have a very small number of home hemodialysis, less than 5 patients. So our patients here prefer to have their care taken care for by the dialysis nurse and not so much on their own. Maybe I can also hand over to Maddie to share what she experienced as a home hemodialysis patient.
Thank you. My name is Maddie and I'm based in the UK. And as Rocco said, I've actually been on dialysis for 25 years since I was 14 years old, and that has been entirely at home. I started when I was still in the pediatrics. I was on peritoneal dialysis, so I was doing APD overnight using a peritoneal dialysis machine, which was fantastic. I did that for 5 years, and during which time I finished all my schooling. I did my public examinations. I applied to university. I had a really positive experience of PD. And then when that stopped working so well, I switched over to hemodialysis. I had a fistula made and trained to go on to home hemodialysis. So I've been on home hemo around 19 years now. And most of that time I've been doing nocturnal home hemodialysis. So sleeping through the night on the machine, and you do 5 nights a week of treatment for 6 or 7 hours. And that gives me total freedom and perfect health. I don't feel like I'm on dialysis at all, even after 25 years, and it enables me to have a very, very fulfilling, busy, kind of normal life. I can't have a kidney transplant due to underlying other complications. So that's why for me, home dialysis has been critical to make the best possible standard of treatment. And I'm aware that I am very lucky that I have had that access continually since the beginning of my dialysis experiences. In the UK, we have around, I think, 5% of patients are on home dialysis. But we are working really hard to improve those numbers and encourage more people to make that choice, because we know that it does give people a really great dialysis experience.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just curious. Now you just heard Jasmine's remark about Singapore, that there are not so many people dialyzing at home and so on. So what do you think about that?
I think it's very interesting. Every country is so different, or even within countries, there is quite a lot of variation. I believe that the barriers to perhaps not having more people on home dialysis in different countries, there's a lot of fear about home dialysis, I think. Perhaps there's quite a lot of belief still within the medical community that perhaps patients are not capable of learning and to do their dialysis at home. And then I think a lot of patients find that idea quite scary. People tend to be introduced to dialysis and it's a very medicalized procedure. You know, there's big machines, there's needles, there's blood. And I think that the way you introduce people to dialysis right at the beginning is very, very important to make it feel comfortable, make them realize that actually it is safe. They are perfectly capable. Most people are capable of learning to dialyze themselves or to work with a care partner at home. So I think it's sad that not everyone around the world has that access, because it really is life-changing. I've been on dialysis 3 times a week just for the short periods of time when I've either been in hospital or training to go home. And the way I felt in terms of fatigue and the fluid and the diet restrictions, it was very, very challenging. It made my week very difficult to plan because I had to always be going to the hospital. And I think that people get comfortable in that regime. And as you said, Jasmine, they perhaps prefer to have their care done for them and the work is done for them. But I think we need to get better at telling people how good the benefits are and how much more freedom and how much more well-being they might have if they dialyze at home. And also persuading people that doing more dialysis is actually better, even though people who don't really want to do more hours because they already have to do, 3 times a week and put 4 hours on the machine. But if you take away the travel and you perhaps fit it into the schedule that you want to do, whether that's evenings or early morning or nighttime, then the burden of those hours is much easier to bear. And then you can fit more sessions in or more hours, which is when you start to feel so much better. So I know there are many complexities to it, but I think we just need to really change the message and the narrative around home and encourage everybody.
Ah, indeed. Thanks for this explanation. So coming back to Jasmine, I can imagine, of course, I've been to Singapore a few times. I met you there, and which was wonderful. But it's of course a very small country with an extremely good infrastructure. Does that has anything to do with it, you think?
Yeah, I was just to say that I totally agree with Manny. Partly it's education, which plays a huge part in getting patients to go for home hemodialysis. But Singapore is a very small country, as Foco has rightly pointed out. We have only about almost 6 million in total population. So number of dialysis patients, we have about 5,000 odd patients. And we have a dialysis clinic in every, say, 10 to 15 minutes drive away. So it becomes very convenient for patients to go to a dialysis center. And they got so used to going to a dialysis center that they didn't dare to try to do it on their own. Majority of our patients here are on the elderly side, and the buttons beeping and blinking and whatnot somewhat terrifies them. So we do have some patients, like I said, a small number of patients that do prefer to do it on their own. They like everything that you have just mentioned, the freedom, and they are very careful with the fistula. They make sure that it's well taken care of, and then their diet is also, they have freedom of diet and everything. So, but we still need a long way to go to educate the patients to do their own dialysis. And there's always this fear of needles, of course.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So here's another question that I would like to ask. What kind of machines are available for home dialysis in your country? Both for PD as for HD. What are you using typically?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have a range of different machines in use in the UK for home dialysis, for home hemodialysis and also PD. And I think it's actually quite important that people don't feel like some machines can be used at home and some can't be used at home, because in reality, we have people using all different types of machines at home successfully. However, the newer generation of machines, and it's really exciting to see the innovation now within the dialysis sort of manufacturing world, is that those machines are getting better and better for home use and smaller, simpler, easier for people to use. And many of the newer machines have been designed with patient input from the very beginning. So they're really well suited for the home environment. So when I talk about the newer machines and the ones that we certainly have available for home in the UK, we have the Quanta Dialysis Technologies machine, we have Next Stage, we're starting to use Physidia as well in some locations. And then we also have the kind of more traditional machines in use at home too. So some people are using Fresenius machines, Baxter, Gambro, Beatborn. We really do have quite a range. Usually it depends on each individual hospital trust who have decided which machines to offer their patients at home. So we don't all necessarily get a free choice. We may have to use, the machine that our hospital offers, but quite often the hospital do consult their patients as well when they're looking at buying new equipment and new machines for home use. They try to hear what the patients want. And I believe that the advent of new technology is fantastic for improving the numbers of people going home, because we want to overcome the fear. We want things to be simple. We don't want, people want it to look nicer in their home environment. So smaller, neater machines are much, much nicer for people to have sitting in their house. And I know lots of people feel more comfortable with a smaller machine. And then for PD, obviously, we have you have the options of the home choice machines or the Fresenius machine, or you could do manual bags if you don't want to have a machine at all.
Okay, well, thanks very much. And of course, the same question also, I'm curious. Jasmine, can you tell a bit?
Yeah, in Singapore, the home dialysis is mainly predominantly PD. So patients here basically use the Baxter home choice device as well as the Fresenius APD Harmony, and also just manual bags. For HD, we don't have the smaller devices here. I think Next Stage was here for a short while, but somehow it didn't take on. And we have for home HD, it's mainly the conventional dialysis device that is being used here. We hope to see new devices coming in because with the current program that we have in Singapore, we're doing a small pilot trying out home hemodialysis. Hopefully that takes off, and then we will see smaller devices coming in. We also did conduct a trial for our own device, which is very small, less than 10 kilo. It's also for home hemo, which uses very little fluid, so it fits into a small home. Because majority of people in Singapore stays in apartments, so that would be perfect for a city kind of living. Yeah, but as you said, Maddie, it has to look nice. It has to fit into the surroundings so that it doesn't look too much. It's not too intrusive. It doesn't look too much like a medical device. So that's the whole idea of how we design what we have as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Although I would say I do also, where people perhaps want to go onto home hemo, but they only have one machine offered to them, I say to people, just go home, take the machine and go home, and then you might get a newer machine in time where you may be able to change your machine. But being at home on any machine is better, in my opinion, than being in the hospital. So if you want to go home, just, do whatever it takes to get yourself home is what I say. And the technology is becoming so much better, yes. But even if you're using what we term more of a traditional machine, you can still fit them in. Yes, it's not quite as nice looking, but if that's your only option, I would say take it. And then if you get a choice in the future, that's even better.
All right. Well, It's lovely to hear this discussion going between you. That's really nice, this interaction. I've got another question for you. Let's start with Jasmine this time. Jasmine, could you describe an average treatment plan for home dialysis in your country? Obviously, that's going to be PD probably, but I'm curious about the trial with the home hemo as well. And so nocturnal, short daily, or traditional schemes? How is it with the clinic visits or the availability of clinicians? I'm just curious. Could you sketch that for me?
Currently, they're actually looking at alternate day dialysis here for the home HD program. So they're looking at 3 times or 4 times a week, and they're looking at 4-hour sessions for the time. It is so that it's more similar to the 3 times a week kind of schedule. So the clinicians visit will still be once a month at the dialysis center itself, but if not, then they just stay at home.
All right, all right. And then, of course, well, Maddie, you have probably also some sketch for us.
Yeah. So obviously over here, most people who are dialyzing in centre will do 3 times a week for 4 hours at a time. Some people might do 5 hours, but technically that's all that can be accommodated for the clinic schedule. Whereas when people go home on hemodialysis, they're really encouraged to do a minimum of 4 times a week or alternate days, because the real huge benefit is removing that long gap. When you're on a 3 times a week schedule, every week you have to have the 2.5 days between treatments, so between Friday and Monday or Saturday and Tuesday. And we know that is where people tend to have problems with fluid overload or high potassium, and they can feel really unwell by the time they reach their next treatment. So when you're at home, you do not have to have that long gap, which we know is so beneficial. And different hospitals offer different options, and in many places, patients are allowed to kind of work out what suits them best as well with their home program. And so increasingly, we are starting to see people who decide to do nocturnal hemodialysis. And as I said before, for me, I do 5 nights a week for 6 or 7 hours on the machine. Some people do 6 nights a week. Some people do 8 hours. And some people do 7 nights a week. And obviously, it depends on your body size and how effective your fistula is and your access. But the more we can minimize those gaps, the better. And the long hours means that as you go kind of 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, you start to clear things like phosphate really effectively. Obviously, things like potassium is really well controlled. So on my regime, I have no diet restrictions at all, no fluid restrictions at all.
Wow.
Which is wonderful. Being on a fluid restriction, I can't tell you how amazing it is to just eat and drink. Because if I do a 7-hour treatment, I can safely remove, 3 to 3.5 liters in that treatment, but keeping a very low fluid removal rate throughout. As we know, that's everything that keeping your heart safe, keeping your safe. Whereas if you're only doing 4 hours, you can only really remove much smaller amounts of fluid. So for me, I really advocate to do as many nights as possible. And I have a personal rule where I don't take 2 nights off in a row as far as I can help it. So I try to never have a 2-night gap unless there's a real emergency or something. And because I just know I won't feel good if I do that. And as I said again, because I'm not able to have a transplant, I am really looking to protect my body and my health for a very long time. But I know for people at home, particularly if they're using certain machines that maybe are doing lower flow dialysis, which some machines do, then they might be doing 5 to 6 sessions a week and doing 3 hours at a time. So there are lots of different options, but I do encourage people to speak to their healthcare team about what will work for them around their life, because we all have busy lives and we all want to be enjoying our lives and doing work or looking after our family. Whatever your priority is, you should put your life first and make your dialysis prescription fit around your life, because then you'll be much more likely to feel like you're willing to put the work in to dialyze at home, because you get the reward of having much more normality and control.
Yeah. So if I hear it well, your being at home for your dialysis helps you to get these longer hours without spending too much time, and because if you do it nocturnal, you're off the hook during the day. And I also hear that no diet restrictions, no fluid intake restrictions. Oh, that's really great. So indeed, you see that doing it at home specifically, at least that's my feeling, that helps you to schedule it along your life. If you do this with a clinic, it's probably much more difficult to schedule that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yes. As I said, I've been on dialysis since I was 14. So I've grown up with dialysis. But because I did PD first and PD, overnight PD, my very early introduction to dialysis is that you do it at home and you do it overnight. And so I was really used to that schedule, and it enabled me to be fully back in education. I didn't lose out the opportunity to do my exams. So that set my life up. Many young people miss a lot of education. They perhaps don't get their important exams if their dialysis doesn't enable them, and that affects the rest of their life, even after transplant, because they're perhaps missing some of those really important qualifications. PD enabled that for me. So when it was time to move to hemodialysis, I couldn't really imagine suddenly going back to a hospital and being stuck on that schedule when I'd had this freedom. And I've always worked full time since I left education. I've worked full time. My health has never stopped me working. It's never stopped me participating in hobbies that I enjoyed, spending time with family and friends, all the things that we all deserve to have. Home dialysis has enabled. So I can't think of any circumstance where I would ever go back to hospital.
Well, that's a very clear statement.
Yes, I was really unwell, but
I think this is what we're trying to achieve in Singapore. So we're taking it in small steps, whereby we just introduce alternate day dialysis. Like you say, that 2-day gap is very important. So we want to get rid of that first. And once patients feel better and they're more encouraged, and hopefully they will be encouraged to do more and longer dialysis as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And the availability of clinicians, how's that, Jasmine? Are there plenty of clinicians in your country?
So that's what we are short of. That's one of the reasons why we are nudging towards home. Although I say there is a dialysis center in close proximity to everyone, but we are lacking in manpower in terms of nurses, in terms of infrastructure, and also physicians. So we are an aging populations. We have the number of dialysis patients is growing in Singapore as well, like every other city out there. So yeah, we will run out of space in say 2050, for example, which is not too far away. So we need to make plans and to start educating patients from now.
Okay. Do you also see that trend, Maddie, in the UK?
In the UK, obviously, we have the NHS, so we have a universal state healthcare system. We are facing definitely some huge challenges with staffing in the NHS. We, both nurses and doctors as well. As the government-funded healthcare system, they're always struggling for money. And whilst I always say that we shouldn't be making decisions about people's care based on money, however, home dialysis actually is cheaper for the NHS, as well as usually better for the patient. So it is one of those unique situations where the benefit is on both sides. And also, if you encourage more people to choose home, if that's right for them, that frees up the time of the staff, the healthcare professionals, to then care for the others who are staying in centre because they just can't go home or not suitable for home. And that, I think also, if you had enough people, particularly with hemodialysis, who were able to go home, you might then be able to offer a bit more flexibility to those in centre in terms of the hours, or maybe an extra session a week to improve their care as well. So it really is a win-win if we get it right. But I also think we have to be careful that when we send patients home on dialysis, that we don't kind of forget about them. So sometimes home dialysis patients say they don't feel very well supported because they're off at home doing their treatment, but maybe not having that contact as regularly with the staff or with other patients. And I know some people do quite enjoy the sense of community that they get from traveling in centre and spending that time through the week with those patients and with the staff who they regularly see. And they don't want to lose that. Whereas I try to explain that the benefit of home is you'll then have a community at home, and you'll be able to be doing more of your normal kind of hobbies or activities, or seeing friends and family more. So you will still have a community, it just will be different. But within the NHS, I mean, all of the healthcare professionals work incredibly hard to support patients every way that they can. But yes, resources are tight, and staffing levels can be really, really rather low, which is another argument for helping support more people out of the hospital if possible.
Yeah, well, I must say, I hear this also in all the countries that I visit. It's hard to get enough nephrologists, and especially also hard to get dialysis nurses new in the trade. And we are seeing now that the people with the gray hair, like me, are now, gradually going to the retirement age. So we do have indeed a desire to recruit more young people and have them enthusiastic about this. I think this is a worldwide phenomenon that we see now. Let me go to another question. Now, this is of course always the nice part. Suppose you'd have a magic wand, and you could do miracles. So, what would you like to change about dialysis in your country or even globally?
And let Maggie go first. What's his experience with
Can I change more than one thing?
Many things as you want.
Okay, so I guess firstly, I would love to see universal access to home dialysis for everybody who wants it as soon as they want it. So no waiting to be trained, and no waiting for machines. And whatever hospital you go to, you have that access and the support equally, because we do still have quite a lot of variation around the country about being able to go home and how you might be supported and what equipment is available. So in the here and now, that would be great, so everyone could have it. Secondly, I think the ability to reimburse patients equally around supporting their costs. So at home in the UK, at least, patients are supposed to have a contribution towards the cost of running the machine at home, so for their water and their electricity. And some people get that and some people don't get that. So we need to standardize and make it fair and equal for everybody. In the bigger picture would be to continue to make the technology smaller and smaller, more portable, really, really flexible, so that you can, we struggle for people who want to travel on hemodialysis in the UK because the units are very full. So if you don't have a portable device, you have to arrange to visit a centre where you're going, and often there isn't space, so you can't travel freely around the UK. So it would be amazing to have the option to either have portability completely or free spaces, so that anyone could travel and visit any part of the country to take holidays or for business.
That's indeed a wonderful perspective. And well, I'm just hooking on that to Jasmine, because I do think, Jasmine, that you are working on a little bit of magic in this portability aspect. Is this correct?
Yes. Currently today we are developing a home hemodialysis device that is less than 10 kilos in weight. It is cardiac floating, so you can just plug it to anything. So there's no infrastructure required for electricity, and there's no need for water as well, because it only uses 4.5 liters of fluid. So you can dialyze anytime, anywhere. Truly, you can just fit it into a hand luggage and hop onto the plane. So as simple as that. Yeah.
Amazing.
Hopefully we can be out as soon as possible, and then we solve some of the issues. We went through. We spoke to so many patients like yourself, and then we went to ask them, if you have a wand, what would you wish for? And we try to make as many of those wishes come true as possible. There's still one thing that I would like to add is vascular access. So if I have something to change, I will make that simpler, because the things last question that we were not able to answer is, how can we make needling simpler and less painful? So that is that fear. If we can answer that one question, I think you will have the perfect thing.
Well, let me go on to another question. How do you think we can increase global awareness of CKD, chronic kidney disease, and dialysis to improve the quality of life worldwide? So for patients around the world, Let me start with Maddie.
I mean, I think this sort of initiative of the advocacy groups of which we have many in lots of different countries should be working together more. So this, it's fantastic that Home Dialyzers United have facilitated this conversation. We should always be listening to share really good experiences and best practice across different countries. I think we've seen social media, although I don't love social media for lots of reasons, it has been a very positive thing for the renal community, because now we can talk to patients all around the world and find out what's going on in their countries, and what types of dialysis people are doing, what machines are available. And I think that if we want to think globally, we need to expand. We collectively, the patient community and the clinical community, really need to expand our thinking. So constantly asking, are we moving things forward all the time, not just carry on doing what we've always done? And it's great to hear that you're doing the pilot in Singapore, for example, to hopefully encourage more uptake of home. And I think also that those who are looking at developing the new technologies and need to really involve and listen to the patients, because we are able to help give so much insight. And from different places around the world where we have very different challenges, might be some countries where they don't have trouble with water, for example. So we need to find a way to reduce the water intake, or perhaps they have unreliable electricity supply, or bad weather, or remote locations. We don't have that problem so much in the UK, but perhaps we can learn from Australia, because that when we work together like that, we come up with optimal solutions that help everybody.
Yeah, I do think so. And Jasmine, what's your catch on that?
Well, I think it's the sharing, the stories that the patients share with each other. I think those are very important. It's different from hearing it from the doctor or the nurse. It's when they share, it is personal, and I think that encourages each person to continue going. I have seen patients that were just newly diagnosed with kidney failure, and when I told them that they have to go on dialysis, you can see their faces like they lost all hope of living. I still always have this image of this old gentleman. He just gave up. Whenever he comes to the clinic, he asks to be pushed into one corner where he faces the wall, and he says that, no, I don't want to talk to anyone. So, but when we got other patients to share and show him that, even though you start dialysis, you can still have a very quality life, good quality life, and you can still do lots of other things. He starts to open up and warm up to the whole idea. I think patient's voice, that is one of the most important things. And collectively, those voices, if they were to make enough noise, and the government agencies can hear that, okay, so we need to increase the number of dialysis per week, we need to increase the hours, we should subsidize this, because at the end of the day, it gives quality of life back to the patients, and then, the health-wise, they are also better. Basically, less medications, less heart problems, less. So it's a win-win for all. I think it's a collective voice of the patients and all the patient advocates out there that should basically help.
Thank you for that. And I do agree on this. And basically, there's two aspects on this. First of all, patient organizations, of course, are nationally or locally organized. And so they typically care and work for the patients in their specific country or region, which is super good, because, you have to be close to each other to optimally tune things to the national situation. But on the other hand, and this is also what I hear from you both now, is that if you also have these interactions across the globe between different patients' organizations, different ways to do things, like Maddie just said, we might learn from Australia, we might learn from other countries. I do think there's a big gain in that. That could be possible. And so it's good that we have these contacts like Home Dialyzers United is doing globally, to try to contact and bridge the gap between the different patient organizations. I really like that. And I see it in your discussions here today that this is indeed completely true. If we would work on solutions that are even more portable, even maybe implantable, then in that case, they could be helped better. That's at least, if you would have a universal implantable technology or biological means, I could imagine that these people would be helped much better and not depending on a clinic, but they could go about their own business. But that's maybe a future dream that we don't have yet. But we might keep that in our mind as a goal. And we should not forget that about 2/3 of the population in the world that needs some form of kidney replacement therapy simply doesn't have access to it.
I think, I guess, whilst the future may look like implantable, biocompatible devices, in our immediate ability is to be creative as we continue to innovate with the machines. Is certainly we need to make the machines as small and as cheap as possible. So looking at component parts and simplification of how they operate, but also using things like solar power, minimal water consumption, like you mentioned, Jasmine, so that in those countries where those resources are limited, you can run a machine perhaps without having an infrastructure. It does still obviously require a level of medical infrastructure because you need to create vascular access. You need access to the blood. I mean, I think PD is actually underused. I believe I'm not an expert in sort of which countries are using which therapy, but I believe PD could be much more widely used than it is, and obviously that's a lower cost, simpler treatment. Doing a manual exchange doesn't actually require anything other than the bags and some sterile, the sterile environment. And the catheter to be inserted, which is a relatively quick and low-cost procedure. So I think perhaps PD people need to shout a bit more about the options of PD in countries where hemodialysis is just very complicated, and use PD more regularly and more widely.
Yeah, that's a very good remark. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. It says PD is widely used in countries like Mexico, Thailand, as Hong Kong, because it's cheaper and it's easier, especially for more remote areas. Yeah.
This was a really interesting discussion. I enjoyed it, really being with you two, and hearing all these different perspectives. But one thing we can agree upon, and that is, if the voices of the patients are united across the world, then we definitely would see a better future for the upcoming decade. And I think it should be the decade of the kidney. That is all we can conclude from this today. And if patients' voices can bridge gaps even across oceans and around the world, and we should have definitely more patients involved when developing new kidney replacement therapies. And with that, we must conclude this webinar.